नौनिहालाने जमात मुझे कुछ कहना है, पर है ये शर्त के ज़ाए मेरा पैगाम न हो.
It's interesting. A couple of days ago, I was reading an article in the newspaper, and it was talking about the rise in mental health disorders. And what's interesting about this article was the fact that they could not pinpoint a specific cause, but they did say that social media has a huge role about this. And we just talked about social media in a previous episode about this. Share yourself, perhaps you could shed some light on some of the symptoms.
Absolutely. Major depressive disorder is one of the easiest disorders, mental illness disorders that you can kind of identify. But with that being said, a lot of people say, I've been feeling sad, or I've been feeling, tired for a large portion of the day, so I must be depressed. But it's a lot more complicated than that, right? There's actually 11 checklist items as per the Diagnostic Statistical Manual, which is what all psychologists must follow. So, as per that 11-item checklist, there's 5 items which must be present for at least a 2-week period consecutively every single day, right? So these items include things like insomnia, reduced appetite, depressed mood for most of the day, nearly every day, right? So these disorders, different, what would you call them? Symptoms, right? So these different symptoms must be exhibited for an extended period of time for you to be classified as depressed. Now, with that being said, I feel like culturally there's this huge bias towards mental health, right? Whereas
there's a huge stigma to it as well. Yeah,
exactly. Where we don't really give a lot of credence to it. We say that, it's just a random thing and it'll kind of go away with time.
At the same time, I think that's true. At the same time, it's also like, if sometimes a lot of the youth or, even elderlies, they take advantage of this word depression. And, if they're going through like a sad phase in their life, they'll just be like, oh, I'm depressed. And then everybody's going to be thinking like, I'm always depressed, I'm always depressed. So you're just going to label yourself as depressed.
Yeah, because especially nowadays, it seems as if it's a word that's tossed around.
Yeah, even though you're not actually depressed.
Even though it's actually something that is very serious and needs to be looked into.
When it is really serious, like he's talking about,
right?
If he's talking about these criteria, if you meet that criteria, okay, you can be diagnosed as clinically depressed.
Right.
But you should not be, like, as a youth, you should not be, first of all, as a youth, you should not be depressed. Like, you should
you can't really say that, right? Like,
but if you are depressed, then you have to take it,
very serious. I think one thing to even add on to that is that the age where kids are taught about depression is too young in one sense. And the reason why I say that is that
and then that'll add to that fact that I'm depressed. You just say whenever you're sad.
Because when you're a young child, though, they don't understand the difference between depression and sadness. So the link that they get in their mind is that, okay, every time I'm sad, this is basically depression. So they can't really make that.
And like especially
change.
When we were kids. It's not a term that we heard.
It wasn't a common.
I didn't hear it until much later.
Exactly.
Much later. But nowadays you hear about kids who are in grade 4 or 5 and they're
committing suicide and they're
depressed and
clinically depressed, right?
Right.
So,
and I think this is going back to one of our previous episodes about social media. We were discussing how there's so much information. There's this plethora of information, and we just kind of pick and choose what we want, right? And then we just subscribe to those kind of mindsets. And I feel like depression has become one of those mindsets, whereas this information is so widely available that people start to, force themselves into these criterias as opposed to just naturally falling onto one of these.
100%.
And in one sense, on top of that too, it's become almost taboo, for example, in a South Asian culture, to say that you are depressed.
Right.
At the same time, obviously, there are certain cases of depression that do exist, right? But within the South Asian culture, sometimes I feel like they kind of just say, it's okay, don't worry about it. But actually, it is there. As well. Sometimes
the South Asian culture, they just tell you, okay, like you'll be fine.
Get over it.
Exactly.
Like the way I just did when I said as a kid, you shouldn't be depressed, right?
Exactly.
So with these 11 symptoms that somebody has to exhibit for a period of, a certain amount of time.
2 weeks,
to be
consecutively.
Diagnosed as clinically depressed. Is it that nowadays depression is more widespread, or was this always the case but we didn't hear about it? Like,
I think it was always
Why
the
is
case.
it that we're hearing about it more so now?
I think it's more so awareness. Right, and there is a better way to quantify when someone has depression, right? How to identify when someone has depression. So I feel like depression has always been there, but now we just have the means and the facilities to kind of, bring someone in if they need help and kind of identify it. We do have that information out on the internet as well, whereas people, who feel like there's something wrong with them can kind of go up and look at, what they're feeling. They can seek that medical help and just kind of take it from there.
So what's the cause of depression?
Just going off to what you just said, sorry, but cut you off there, but I don't know the stats, but from what I can think of and what I've observed, I think it is on the rise, and I think it's mostly because of social media, because there's so many different other insecurities that are developing, cyberbullying and things that we've already discussed. I think it might be on the rise, especially with the youth, because they have no other way out, so they become depressed and then they become closed, and then nobody helps them, and then they're becoming.
I see two sides to this as well. I see one side, which is the fact that we have better diagnostic system these days to address or to label someone as depressed. So maybe 50 years ago there could be a population that was depressed.
Yeah, and there was
but there's a diagnostic system for that. So there's that one aspect as well. But at the same time, I also feel the second aspect is the aspect of isolation, though. We talk about, for example, we come from families where it's all about the community, about the family. We go to the masjid, we meet people. It's all about the family or the bigger family. But these days, it's all about isolation. You go to work, you go in your car, you go by yourself, you go to work.
You mind your own business.
You mind your own business, you're on your phone, so you become isolated. And when you're not used to that,
like you don't talk to people, you don't have any human interaction. The only interaction you have is through texting or through WhatsApp or something.
In psychology, there are these two facets, right, which kind of describe how people see themselves. So there's an internal locus of control and an external locus of control. And so, I would kind of agree with what you said with regards to when we were children, right? Not a lot of people exhibited these depressive symptoms, but that's because we all had this internal locus of control, right? We believed that we had the capability of shaping our own world. But now with the prevalence of social media, it's an external locus of control, right? Because now my worth is established by how many likes I can get, how many, comments I can get, and what the comments are. So it's no longer, you looking at yourself and saying, I can do this, right? Now it's a matter of you saying, do others think I can do this?
But I think all of these things tie into being sad or having low self-esteem. I think actual depression is much deeper, and it's actually a serious problem.
Very
actual
serious.
Depression, and what you said is, what is depression, what is the cause, is there's an actual chemical imbalance that happens in your brain, which causes you to block your dopamine receptors so that you cannot exhibit the feeling of, that good feeling that you get when you eat something or whatever. And
specifically
your thoughts,
serotonin receptors.
Serotonin receptors. So your thoughts just spiral into this vicious, negative cycle, and then you can't get out of it. And that is something very serious, and for that you need medication to be able to counterbalance that, right? So that's what actual depression is. And
I think that there's that fine line then in one sense, which is what is sadness and what is depression. And the thing is that we have to understand
sadness is just a natural.
It's a natural thing,
that's key.
And we need sadness in one sense, because if you don't have sadness, how would you ever know what happiness is?
Right.
Because it's all relative.
It's relative, though, right? So I mean, sadness plays a very important role in that, right? Sadness, it brings a range of emotions. All of our emotions that exist within us are there for a reason. They're not just there just for the sake of being something that is there. So it's very important, in that sense.
The differentiation between sadness and depression is that depression is a chronic ailment, and it's something that waxes and wanes over time, and it doesn't dissipate ever. Whereas sadness, you might be sad for a day, 2 days, a week maybe, but then after that, it's gone, and you never experience that sadness again. Whereas with depression, you're kind of stuck with it for the rest of your life until you seek that medical treatment.
What are the causes of depression or even sadness generally that we feel?
It can be biological. Okay, so people can be predisposed to having depressive feelings. Okay? But then it's environmentally activated. So let's just say I have the genes, so to speak, right? So it goes into detail with the lengths of the receptors and whatnot, but just to simplify, let's just say I have the genes for depression, right? But I might never get depressed because the environment in which I live is so conducive to a positive, upbringing, so conducive to that internal locus of control that I never really tap into those depressive genes. Whereas if I'm brought up in an environment where I'm constantly being degraded and ridiculed, then those depressive genes will kick in, and I'd be more likely to experience depressive feelings, right? And then it kicks into serotonin, right? You don't have enough serotonin being processed, and there's just shortage of dopamine.
I can touch a little bit upon that. It has also a lot to do with because the brain is a very physical thing and a chemical thing, it has to do with your physical body as well, right? So if your diet is off, if you're not getting the right vitamins and minerals, if you're not getting the right, things in your body to be able to make your brain function optimally, you're going to be more, inclined to getting depressed. If you're not physically active, right? If you're not actually using your brain properly. So all of these things are going to be combining to making you feeling depressed, right?
You know, one thing on top of that as well, we talked about this a couple episodes ago about identity, right? And the one thing I have to understand is that males in general, when they say that they say something like we are depressed, it almost becomes like, you know what, females, okay, fine, like it's okay, you're depressed, you're more fragile, but males, oh, you know, just get over it, or that's not
You're
serious.
supposed to brush it off.
You're supposed to be more hard in a way, right? You're not supposed to express your feelings or
Yeah.
emotions in one sense. And I think that's a little bit of an issue that needs to be addressed as well. Where
Yeah, because
males
then
can
we
feel,
won't talk about it as much. We won't express it,
Exactly.
and we'll be
Right.
dealing with it within ourselves instead of getting help.
Exactly.
Exactly.
What happens is that when you deal with it inside, the ideas and the thoughts fester inside and they build up over time. And eventually
Right.
what happens when things build up, they explode. Right?
Right.
Well, you take your anger out on your partner or your friend or
Right.
your family or somebody. So in that sense, you have to let these things out in one sense.
Right.
You know, I think adding on to this is pretty interesting. During Hazur Anwar's tour of Canada in 2016, a Jami student asked Hazur, may Allah be his helper, that, you know, what is the cause for this depression and, you know, the sadness that everybody feels? Right? So Hazur said something very interesting, that, you know, it happens because of people's worldly desires.
Right.
Right? Because they wish to achieve something that's materialistic, that doesn't have to do with spirituality.
And when they
Right,
can't
so-
achieve it, they break
And
apart.
they can't. And then Hazur also said that, you know, Allah bi zikrillahi tatma'innul qulub, right? The verse of the Holy Quran, that it is in the remembrance of Allah that hearts find comfort, right? So like just a natural, or not natural, like the unnatural feeling of just being agitated throughout life. Why does that happen? Is because, you know, people aren't being comforted by whatever it is that they're getting in life, right? So they need to turn towards spirituality.
I find this so very interesting because we were just discussing internal and external locus of control. Now, when you turn to Allah the Almighty and you ask Him for His mercy and His help, you are giving up that internal locus of control for an external locus of control. But it's very interesting because now you're not giving it up to people, you're giving it up to this power which you, from the bottom of your heart, believe can help you, right? And because of that belief, it can absolutely change
And you know
everything.
what you said, based on like having these worldly desires. Say you have these worldly desires. If you're, for example, you want to get this job, right? You really want to get this job. If you were praying and working towards getting that job, and if you were, you know, asking Allah Ta'ala for help to, you know, I really want to get this job. This is best for me. You know, let me have this job. If you get that variable out there, that if this is best for me, let me have this job, right? Now, if you get it, you're going to be happy. But if you don't get it, you're going to be, you know, you're not going to be sad, but you're going to be okay with the will of God.
No, like you're
You know,
still going to
that
be
was
content.
because you had a backbone. You
And
had God
being
there with you.
content is what the main thing is, right? It's not even about happiness or being joyful, it's just being comforted or being content about whatever is going on.
And
Knowing that
I think
everything happens for a
even
reason.
with being content, another thing that I can also recommend is that you have to surround, your environment plays a big role in this too.
100%.
And you have to surround yourself with positive people as well.
Yeah,
Because, for example, if you surround yourself with people who are every day talking about the negative aspect of life and, you know, they're feeling these sort of things, it also impacts you as well, whether it's directly or indirectly as well. So again, you know, for example, like whatever a lot of times they say is that when you go to sleep, the last thing that you listen to or think about, it does have an impact on your dreams as well. So again, throughout the day, surround yourself with positivity as well.
So I actually want to, I was just going to say, I want to take a minute here to discuss a study that happened, right? So this was a study done by Facebook. And we touched base on this in one of the previous episodes, but essentially what they did is they broke people up into two separate groups. So you had the positive group and the negative group. And what they did is they filtered your friend feed so that the negative group only received negative comments, okay? So they would see, you know, people that are having a bad day, right? So they'd post like, you know, not feeling too good today. That's what they would see. Whereas the positive group would only see positive comments, right? Like, amazing day today, beautiful sun, beautiful weather. And what they found, interestingly enough, is that based on the kinds of comments that people were seeing on their friends' wall, right, they would cater their comments more so towards that kind of outlook. So people in the positive group would say, amazing day, beautiful weather, time to go to the beach. Whereas people in the negative group would say, feeling down, feeling alone, you know, no one's here with me, whatever, right, along those lines. So just kind of going back to, you know, surrounding yourself with positivity. And I think Jamaat-e-Ahmadiyya does such an amazing, you know, part in that, right? We have Lajna-e-Mala, Nasirat, Itfal, Khudam, Ansar. You're surrounding yourself with people of your own age, of your own mindset, right? And it's like together you can kind of get through anything.
And then at the same time, you have the Khalifa of Islam,
Of course.
who opens his doors. You know, he asks youth to write letters to him to establish a living relationship. With Ahmadiyya.
Right.
Right. And this could, you know, this sort of balances your life as well. And it really grounds you as well when you know that you have a living relationship with Zuri Anwar.
And think about it, for example, think about the situation where a person who is Muslim, then they're told, you know, we're commanded to go to the masjid for congregational prayers. You go to the masjid, you meet 10, 15, 20 people at each prayer.
Everyone asking you, hey, how's your day?
How's your day? How are
Socialize with
you?
them,
Right?
figure out
Socialize
life.
with them too. If you times that by 5 prayers, I mean, on average, you're meeting about 100 people, unique people every day. Whereas the average person might interact with 1, 2, or 3
So
people.
the system is set up for you to succeed. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Imagine how many thoughts are coming in at one time.
And this human interaction is actually something that other people crave.
Yeah.
Right.
Because
we take for granted.
We take for granted.
If I'm coming to namaz 5-10 times a day at the same masjid, I'm bound to build a connection with some of the people there.
Absolutely.
So if I'm
Exactly.
meeting those people and I talk to them and I'm having a bad day, I can confide in one of them
Yeah.
and be like, no, things are not going well.
Right.
Something's wrong, and they can help me out with that, right? So that's a huge thing. But what you said earlier about your thoughts and not thoughts, but being positive.
Yeah.
That's another thing that a lot of motivational books, a lot of things like that, they all talk about this positivity and thinking positive, and how positive attracts more positivity towards you, right? And that has to do a lot with
attraction.
the law of attraction. And that's a lot with, again, with the wiring of the brain, right? So if you're always thinking positive thoughts, you're gonna wire your brain.
And
to be
this law
positive,
also has to
right?
do with being thankful
Yes.
for something
Yeah.
as well.
Yeah.
Right? So I mean, if you have positive thoughts about what is going on, it's actually a hadith Qudsi. The Holy Prophet, peace be upon him, was actually told by God Almighty that I am as my servant thinks I am.
Thinks I am.
right.
Right? So let my servant think of me as he pleases. Right? So if you have positive thoughts about God and how he will treat you, then that is how God will treat you.
Right.
One of the beautiful thing I see is that, the role model of the Holy Prophet, peace be upon him, himself, right? Like the Holy Prophet, peace be upon him, has said at one point that the Holy Quran was revealed in a state of sadness.
That's very
So you should recite it
Mm-hmm.
in a state of sadness as well, so that you could have that impact. It can have an impact on your soul and your heart.
Yeah.
The Promised Messiah, peace be upon him, in the commentary of a verse of the Holy Quran, he comments on this and he says that, this actually shows how much sadness there was in the life of the Holy Prophet, peace be upon him, because the Holy Quran was revealed to him, and the Holy Prophet, peace be upon him, said that, it's revealed in a state of sadness, so you should recite it in a state of sadness.
Right.
And then but I mean, in contrast to this, we find that companions of the Holy Prophet, peace be upon him, when they would describe him, they would say that
he
was always smiling.
Yeah, smiling. Yeah.
Right? And he was always happy, and he would always meet people with a smile on his face, and he would be joyful.
You know what?
Right? So this is a amazing example.
One thing
us
that
to
comes to
follow.
mind as well is that let's take in a scenario of hypothetical situation. Let's remove sadness altogether, right? Now we have happiness all the time. What are we going to think in the situation that, we've achieved this happiness, we did everything ourselves.
Right.
This sadness makes us realize as human beings how feeble we are, how weak we are.
Yeah.
How weak.
And this helps us to turn to God
Right.
and develops our faith in God. Because if it was all about happiness all the time, we would think to ourselves, wow, I'm so strong, I'm always happy, and I can do everything.
Right.
But when when do you get sad? When you don't accomplish something, when something doesn't go your way. And that's what ends up making you turn towards God in your sadness. And again, you're talking about sadness over there too.
And being happy all the time would just desensitize you to happiness to a point where you just wouldn't feel anything.
Even happiness wouldn't be happiness anymore.
Exactly.
Right? It would be.
I actually just want to touch on something that you were saying, with regards to the Holy Prophet and how, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and the Holy Quran was revealed in a state of sadness, and you could just tell his life, right? It was very sad, but then he would always greet people with a smile on his face. Now, there's research coming out recently that says that if you're in a down mood, if you're not feeling too good about yourself, smile. Just fake it.
Start with smiling,
Right?
yeah,
Just start
yeah.
smiling.
Fake it till you make it. Right?
Fake it till you make it. Exactly. And you just keep smiling. And what they found is that in a matter of hours, right, what happens is your mood starts to switch, right? You essentially trick your brain into saying, you know what, I'm not sad, I'm happy.
Yeah, it's very interesting. Hazrat Muslim Radhiyallahu Ta'ala anhu has actually given some tips about how to achieve a desired state in prayer and worship. To a point where, where people can actually weep and cry in front of God. Some people have trouble.
Yeah, and he says to
right?
just pretend if you can.
Exactly, right? So Hazur, may Allah be pleased with them, said that, make a face as if you're going to cry, and this will actually bring those
Encourage you to
emotions
cry.
out,
Yeah.
right? So it's just the same thing.
Right.
And a lot
It's,
of times,
it's the same thing like I mentioned. It's the wiring of the brain, right? So if you think
Exactly.
positive, if you think negative, it's gonna have a physical toll on you, right?
Right.
So you think positive, you're gonna have positive thoughts, and positive things are gonna happen to you.
And at the same time, to add on to that too, is we have to understand what sadness is, right? Because for some people living in Canada, we have all the, everything available to us. We get sad when, for example, someone doesn't like our picture, or someone doesn't.
Hashtag first world problems.
Or, first world problems in one sense, right? Like we get sad at these little things over there, but at the same time, we see all these pictures of Africa and what's happening over there, or in the Middle East with the war that's going on over there, and they're just happy to even have a little morsel of food.
Right.
And they get happy if they get water that day.
They get water that day, and we're we're drinking water, eating food, and we're enjoying it.
Like look at the famine in Sudan right now, right?
Yeah.
And here we are just.
That ties back into what Rabbi Saab said about being thankful. So if you're grateful, you're going to be happier. And in Islam, there's a hadith that says that you should look at people that have less than you to be able to
appreciate
what you have. Right?
And then at the same time, the Holy Quran, وَلَا إِن شَكَرْتُمْ لَأَزِيدَنَّكُمْ, if you are grateful, I will increase for you.
So what are some of the methods that we can use to counter depression? How can we get out of depression? What can we do if we are depressed or we know somebody that's depressed?
Honestly, the best thing to do is to seek help. Right? Depression is one of those things that you can't go through alone. And so, there's countless research which has now shown that, once you have familial support, emotional support, that's the first step. Following that, you need to seek professional medical treatment, right? Once your family's on board and they say, you know what, we're here, we have your back, we're gonna, be there for you throughout your whole process, and then you go to the medical treatment center, and then they guide you through the whole process, you can overcome depression.
A huge thing with depression, there's tons of research on this, and it's been proven by time and time again, is physical activity. Right?
Yes.
So if you are
naturally Ghulam,
if you're physically active, if you go for a walk, when you see the greenery and the blue in the water, it changes the effect in your biochemistry when you're walking, right? And that has a very soothing effect, right? And when you do physical activity, vigorous physical activity, or even light, what happens is it changes your chemistry and it releases endorphins in your body, which are, good feeling hormones, as you can say, right?
Right.
And that changes your chemistry again and rewires again, and it makes you, feel better. And so physical activity is key. So if, you need to have that in your regime so that you can get better.
Exactly. And what's very interesting is another study, just to kind of top up on top of that, is in Norway, one of those countries where you have sunlight for 6 months and then darkness for another 6 months. Research has found that in the 6 months of darkness, the level of depression goes up significantly.
I don't know that.
Right? And it's just lack of sunlight, right? Lack of endorphins. So what they do then is they have these sun lamps, which they have in their houses, and they sit in front of them for a few hours a day just to maintain those same endorphins.
That level of happiness, I guess, too.
Exactly, yeah.
And I think the most powerful thing that we can take away in terms of, how to cure depression is, there's a verse in the Holy Quran that says, La taqnatu min rahmatillah, right? That do not despair from the mercy of Allah. So that if you're a believer, if you believe in Allah Ta'ala, you will know that Allah Ta'ala says that don't despair from my mercy. So seek Allah Ta'ala's help, ask him, that, he's not going to leave you alone. He's always there with you every step of the way, and he'll get you out of whatever you're in. So,
but with that, God also says that you need to take, actual action towards it as well, right? Of course. And then prayer on top of that. So, of course, see.
The interesting thing about this verse is that it's actually speaking about people who have committed sins against their own
they wronged their souls.
So they wronged themselves.
They've wronged their souls, right?
Yeah.
So it says that.
So you know that he's always there, and you should never despair in his mercy because it encompasses everything.
So I think what's interesting over here is that we have two aspects. One is obviously from a religious perspective, we say that God is the one who helps. But at the same time, from our point of view for someone else, is that if you need professional help, don't be shy as well at the same time.
And physical activity.
And at the same time, we can't forget about the physical activity as well.
I mean, at the same time, us being youth and us talking about this subject,
it's already a huge step forward, I think.
Yeah, right. And I think people could approach us as well.
Yeah, I mean, exactly.
Listen, feel free to talk to your friends about it, right? Yeah. Tell your friends about it, because at the end of the day, they're there for your well-being, right? They're not going to ridicule you. They're not going to say anything.
Even as we are talking about this right now, we are not perfect as well. We've gone through stages of sadness and despair and happiness and all these things that come with us too, right?
Because it's natural.
It's a natural thing, though. Right. Our parents have experienced this. We've experienced this. So again, talk to someone, right? As you're watching this episode, perhaps reach out to someone as well if you have something in your mind.
Yeah.
I think we should end off with this big smile, Shadia. Big smile.
Big smile. And I just want you guys to know that I'm here for you guys at all times.
Yeah, of course.
So I really enjoyed this discussion again.
Yeah, likewise. Jazakumullah.
नौने हालाने जमाते मुझे कुछ कह